GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Friday Morning with Esther and Philip here on GB News. We've got a great show lined up for you today.
We'll be discussing Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer's first speeches of the year. We'll be looking at them with Mail on Sunday columnist Dan Hodges. And we've also got the leader of Reform UK on the programme, Richard Tice, to talk about his party's plans for 2023.
And as the psychodrama with Harry continues, we'll be joined by our royal reporter Cameron Walker to talk about the unfolding situation, especially when he named how many people that he said he'd killed in when he was an army officer. And as the female prison officers get sent to jail for dating inmates, we ask, why do women go for bad boys? Does that
My
make
dear,
sense?
why don't I? And we want to hear from you as always this morning, so to get in touch with us, email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we get into all of that, here are your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Philip, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Prince Harry says he saw a red mist in Prince William during an argument with him, claiming his brother wanted Harry to hit him back, but he chose not to. In a new trailer for ITV's interview with the Duke of Sussex, he talks about the alleged physical attack by Prince William in 2019, detailed in his memoir Spare. He describes his brother's level of frustration and compares it to similar feelings he experienced for so many years. The royal also says he wants reconciliation with his family, but first he says there needs to be accountability. Former royal correspondent Charles Ray told us this could be the end of Harry's relationship with the royal family.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
Passengers are experiencing yet more travel disruption today on the fourth consecutive day of train strikes. RMT and 14 operators have walked out over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services are operating as normal. Negotiations are expected to continue next week, but the unions are accusing the government of blocking a deal, which the government denies. RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch says union members want to find a solution.
We'll review what we do next week back at our head office when we see what the stance of the government is following on Monday, whether there's a schedule of talks. That will allow us a bit of time, hopefully, before we need to take any more action. We don't want to take action, we want a solution. But the mandate is there. If we can't get any movement and get a resolution, we'll have to resort back to being back on the picket lines.
Meanwhile, the Royal College of Nursing says it will consider accepting a 10% pay rise for its members in order to prevent further industrial action. The union's calling on the government to meet halfway after originally demanding a 19% increase. General Secretary Pat Cullen's urging the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary to do the decent thing ahead of planned strikes later this month. Pat McFadden is Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He's refusing to say what percentage Labour would offer.
Look, I think nurses are worth the world. And when we were in government, we never had NHS strikes like this, and we had a far better NHS than we've got now in terms of waiting times and waiting lists. But I'm afraid you can ask me all day, I'm not going to pick a particular percentage out. What I am going to call for is serious negotiations to end these disputes, get the nurses back to work, so that we can get those waiting lists and times down.
Ukraine is calling Russia's order for a 36-hour ceasefire a trick. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow will use the time to regroup their forces. Kyiv wants the Kremlin's troops to leave occupied territories before a temporary truce can happen. US President Joe Biden says the ceasefire offers a sign of Russia's The ceasefire offer, is a sign of Russia's desperation. It's set to start at around noon. The Health Secretary is signing an agreement today that he says could speed up research into cancer treatment. Steve Barclay says the deal with BioNTech means cancer patients in England will get early access to experimental trials, including cancer vaccines. In total, 10,000 doses of personalised therapies could be delivered to patients by 2030. Shell will pay around £1.7 billion in UK and EU windfall taxes for the final quarter of last year. The oil giant says it'll face a hit to earnings because of the increased UK energy profits levy and additional EU taxes. Back in October, bosses at the firm said they hadn't paid any UK windfall taxes because of heavy investment in the North Sea. Well, that is petrol retailers are being criticised for failing to reduce prices last month in line with wholesale fuel costs. The RAC says the average price of petrol fell by 8.4 pence per litre when it should have been cut by 11 pence. Diesel dropped by 9.4p per litre instead of 14 pence. The motoring group's calling on the big four supermarkets to give drivers a fairer deal when they fill up. Tech bosses should be held legally responsible for harmful online content, according to a new poll. The NSPCC says 66% of adults want managers to be prosecuted for failures that result in serious harm to children. It's urging the government to strengthen the online safety bill when it returns to Parliament later this month. The children's charity estimates more than 21,000 online child sexual offences will have been recorded by police since the legislation was delayed last summer. And some breaking sad news just in. Former Chelsea striker and manager Gianluca Vialli has died from cancer at the age of 58. First diagnosed in 2017, he was given the all-clear a year later, only for the illness to return. He announced temporary leave from his role with Italy's national team back in December to focus on his health. Vialli earned 59 caps for Italy and won the Champions League with Juventus before joining Chelsea in 1996. He was the first Italian to manage a Premier League side, becoming player manager for the Blues in 1998. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rihanna. Now, we are delighted to be joined in the studio throughout the show by writer and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop and former Labour MP Simon Danczuk. Now, just a quick question. Harry's book, tasteless or truthful, Simon?
Oh, truthful, but extremely sad. I really feel for Harry, and I actually think he needs help, I think.
Entirely predictable. This was coming down the line ever since they exited the royal family.
Well, we'll be talking a little bit more about this psychodrama later on with our royal correspondent. So we'll be doing that a little bit later. Now, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer have delivered their first speeches of 2023, outlining their party's plans and priorities for the year ahead.
On Wednesday, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made 5 promises to the country centred around the economy, the NHS and immigration.
Speaking yesterday, Labour leader Keir Starmer promised a take-back control bill to transfer power from Westminster to the communities.
Joining us now is Mail on Sunday columnist Dan Hodges. Dan, thank you for joining us. So, in the battle of the party leaders, who do you think won in the first speech of the year? Was it Rishi or Keir?
It was Rishi. I was very surprised, actually, because obviously Keir Starmer had a very successful and very effective 2022. I think most people now think it's his election to lose. And what I was looking for, and what I thought that the test for him with his big news speech, was to show that he was moving Labour from being an effective opposition to a position where they could demonstrate they'd be an effective government, and he singularly failed to do that. I mean, I found it bizarre, actually. I mean, you summed up. I mean, Rishi Sunak gave a speech in which he talked about the health service, about immigration, about the economy, which are quite clearly the public's and the British people's priorities at the moment. And Keir Starmer talked about some abstract taking back control bill and devolution, which is very much not what is the public priority. So I think it was a big missed opportunity for Keir Starmer. And I think to, as I say, answer your question, I think Rishi won that one hands down.
That you were looking for Keir Starmer to be transitioned into a party of government. I guess by saying that he wasn't going to get the big government checkbook out and that kind of thing, that there's, sort of basically hinting that they're not going to put up taxes, or if they are, very modestly. Is that not a way of Labour transitioning from its traditional high spend, high tax position to something that is more acceptable to the British people?
It would be if he could actually follow through on it. But I mean, he was asked specifically, well, what did he mean by that? Was he prepared to sign up to matching the current government spending limits and future government spending plans? And he wasn't able to do that. And I think that was the sort of the big hole in. I mean, actually, there were quite a few big holes. In fact, there was more hole than substance in Keir's speech. In a number of areas, he was asked specifically, well, what did it actually mean? What was he going to do in practice? And time and again, he couldn't answer. And, you could be critical, and some people were critical of Rishi's speech. Some people said it wasn't ambitious enough and the targets he was setting would be too easily met. Other people said it was just words and he doesn't actually have a plan for meeting the targets. And both those criticisms may turn out to be correct. But at least Rishi Sunak gave a substantive benchmark against which we can now judge how he delivers and the government delivers over the next 12 months. Whereas I say, Keir Starmer's was just sort of a bit of abstract waffle, to be honest.
But don't they have two different timelines to play to? So Rishi does have to set something straight away, and he needs to be winning straight away. So halving inflation, getting things under control, he has to do that. And it was in line of all the sort of budgetary forecasts, so he's going to make that. Whereas Keir's playing a much longer game. He only had to sort of do signalling. And people will say maybe it was clever, those signallings.
Yeah, I don't agree with this analysis. There's loads and loads of time. I mean, the election is the result. Look, I think a lot of people think the result of the next election is probably baked in already. But if it isn't, it most certainly is going to be by the end of this year. This is the year where the next election is going to be decided. Obviously, Keir Starmer has lost time because of COVID. In terms of introducing himself to the British public and being able to cut through with the British public. So I don't agree that he's got a vast amount of time. I think this is got to be the year when, as I say, Keir Starmer shows he and Labour are now ready for government. And I don't think that speech was a particularly good start.
He talks about his take back control bill, and people might say, well, that's all might be vacuous or not really what people are particularly interested in. People might argue, though, that it was quite a clever way of trying to reassure Leave voters that actually he wasn't going to sell them down the river and that they can trust Labour once again. What would you say about that?
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think that is a potentially good strategy. But the reality is, whilst he had the slogan, when he was asked, well, in practice, what does this mean? I mean, quite simply, what is going to be in Labour's take back control bill? There weren't any answers. And I think, one minister said to me yesterday, well, it does show Keir's learned the lessons of Brexit, because he's basically come out with a good slogan and then said he'll fill in the details later. But I mean, I think certainly strategically, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what he does want to reassure Brexit voters. But if he is going to reassure Brexit voters, who I think we would all accept are quite cynical about where Keir Starmer is coming from on this, given obviously he was very much in the lead in trying to sort of block or turn around Brexit in the previous Parliament. I think he's going to need to do a lot more if he's going to win Brexit voters over.
Dan, can I give you some quick-fire questions and you can maybe just give us a number out of 5? So if I do Rishi and Keir, so marks for content, Rishi and Keir.
4 and 2.
OK. Marks for delivery.
They're both quite competent speakers. I think 3 and 3. I mean, they didn't set the world on fire, but no big gaffes.
And marks for reaching out to the audience they need.
4 for Rishi, 1 for Keir.
OK, well, a harsh marker there. But look, Tessa can hardly contain herself. She's wriggling on her seat there. I don't think she's agreeing with what you said. You can stay there, Dan. Let's see what she says.
Yeah, in fact, Dan, every time you spoke, I found that I thought the exact opposite. They're both technocrats. They're both pretty dull. I suppose we want someone slightly dull at the helm over the last few years, what we've been subjected to. But actually, I thought the way in which Keir Starmer took the slogan "Take Back Control," identified that lots of regions in Britain felt like and still feel like they have no agency, was clever. Also, by wearing those Brexit clothes, that enables him to then criticise the failures to execute Brexit effectively, which is what he's going to need to do leading up to the next election.
Oh, hang on. Even Simon Danchuk here, ex-Labour MP, doesn't agree.
Tessa, far too complicated. The public want to hear what is going to be done for them now. And we've had House of Lords reform from Keir Starmer last month. We've got devolution this month. Both big speeches, big issues for him, but not for the public. He's completely missing the mark. No. Dan is right. The only point I disagree with Dan with is that I think the Conservatives could still win the next general election. I don't think it's in the back.
OK.
And more mistakes like this by Keir is ensuring that Conservatives could well win it.
Well, if you look at what Rishi Sunak said, popping up the day before with his 5 pledges and going off on one about mathematics, when a third of children...
speech that appeals to
I'm so sorry. Vagaries like, oh, inflation will come down. Well, yes, and if it does, it'll be thanks to the Bank of England. Actually, mate, why aren't you in a room dealing with the strikes that mean most of us are having to listen to your speech at home because we can't get to work today? I thought it was Rishi Sunak that missed the mark.
What about immigration? I mean, Keir Starmer, it's a massive issue for our viewers as well as for lots of voters. Never even seem to mention that.
It's very much a Conservative problem, isn't it? One under 13 years of Conservative government that hasn't yet been solved.
Do you not think he should have a plan to try and tackle it? No? Is that not a duty if he wants to be Prime Minister to actually say this is what I would do?
I think at the moment the buck stops in immigration terms with the Conservative Prime Minister. And all Rishi said was, we'll stop the boats. But I didn't actually hear a blueprint as to how that was going to happen and how there was going to be a reasonable, fair and humane way for asylum seekers to come into this country legally.
Make laws, he said.
What I think both leaders fail to do is address this issue about who controls Britain. That's the big issue in 2023. Who controls Britain? Is it the European Court of Human Rights in terms of immigration? Is it the trade union barons? Is it the oil protesters? It should be politicians. We need a strong leadership that's going to take back control in terms of running the country, directing the police, tackling immigration. Who controls Britain is the big issue for 2023.
And maybe he was alluding to that, Sir Keir Starmer, when he was saying taking back control in one way or another. I have to say I have a different view on that altogether. For somebody who's pro-European, which Keir was, in a way, you never took back control, you allowed Europe to it. And what he'll do now, he won't take back control again. He will let the devolved areas fight amongst themselves. I thought he was actually giving up all attempt of controlling the country. I thought it was a clever way of doing it. I don't know if we've still got Dan with us. Is he still there, or is Dan? So you've heard the debate here. Like I said, I don't think he'll be taking back control whatsoever. I think he's happy to pass it either up to Europe or down to the regions.
Well, I think we had the comment there that it's clever that he's stealing the Brexit clothes. But the question is you can steal the clothes, but do the clothes fit? And it's like I said, Keir Starmer, if he wants to convince people he's had some sort of Damascene conversion from being very pro-European to being a born-again Brexiteer, he's really going to have to put his money where his mouth is. And he's going to have to come up with some very, very concrete, substantive examples about how he is, if this is what he wants to do, how he is going to embrace Brexit, how he is going to deliver Brexit, how he is going to build on Brexit.
Dan, if you
and he's going to have to do a lot more than say, I've got to take back control bill.
Tessa's heckling you. Come on, Tessa.
I am heckling. That is entirely disingenuous on your part, Dan, and you absolutely know it. Because what he was doing is he was stealing the slogan. He was attributing the lack of agency that people felt to the reason why they voted Brexit. He wasn't going, oh, suddenly I'm a wholehearted Brexiteer. Far from it.
Well, that's the point. He's come up with a slogan. You clearly don't believe he really believes in the slogan. And I'm just saying, I kind of agree with you at the moment, but I think the British people recognise that as well. I don't think this is the point. I don't think anybody who supports Brexit saw that speech and thought anything other than, well, Keir's coming out with a slogan to try and convince me, but there's nothing behind it. And I'm just saying, if strategically he's trying to convince Brexiteers he's on their side, he's going to have to do more than that, because as you pointed out, it hasn't fooled you, and I don't think it's fooled the Brexiteers.
And how about what Philip said about the immigration issue? Should he have tackled it, or was he right, Sir Keir Starmer, to basically ignore it?
No, I mean, he's definitely going to have to tackle it. I mean, that's why I said I was surprised. I thought he would use this speech as an opportunity to seize one of those issues, maybe set out his strategy for immigration, maybe, put more flesh on the bones in terms of the economy. I mean, he did actually come up with something significant in saying he was moving away from his commitment to abolish tuition fees. Now, that's a big statement. That's a big change.
Yeah.
He could have used the speech as an opportunity to flesh out that, but he didn't.
Hodges,
and as I said,
thank you very much indeed. We hope to have you back on. But one thing he did do is roll up his sleeves. I thought that was the most irritating little visual that he could possibly have done. Dan Hodges, thank you very much indeed for joining us now.
I was just thinking, though, Tessa, just quickly, he was on about, restoring trust in politics and passing power to the people, Keir Starmer, all the rest of it. He's the one who tried to overturn the result of the EU referendum. So it's a bit rich, isn't it, for somebody who tried to do that to start talking about power to the people and trust in politics?
No, look, it's a huge grey area, isn't it, about the Brexit vote? Right now, according to the polls, most of us actually would prefer not to have exited the EU. So this is highly contentious. All I would say is watch out, Conservatives, for the phrase take back control biting you on the bottom. Because if Keir Starmer's using it now, you know the next team that's going to start using it. Those pushing for Indie Ref 2 in Scotland. Take back control.
Well, you heard that here. Everybody will be saying take back control, whether they do or not. Anyway, coming up, we'll be discussing the ongoing psychodrama surrounding Prince Harry, so don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:25. So, tasteless or truthful? The continuation of the psychodrama, and just when you thought Harry couldn't stoop any lower, he has. Let's talk to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. And I say when you couldn't stoop any lower, to actually say, I killed 25 Taliban hunters. Where fighters? Where does that take us?
Well, it's got a lot of pick-up online, as you can imagine, lots of commentary. It's clearly fairly... I think a lot of people are saying it's quite distasteful, the fact that he has decided to put a number on the number of people he claims to have killed when he served in Afghanistan. He did 2 tours of Afghanistan, of course, the first of which he had to be pulled out early due to the media embargo being broken by a foreign news publication, I think it was in Australia, which therefore broke his cover that he was serving on the front line, and he had to be pulled out for his own safety. That hugely was damaging for Prince Harry, and then he went to subsequently to serve on a second tour, which is where he claims he killed 25 Taliban insurgents. But I believe we can now speak to a former army major, Chris Hunter. Chris, welcome to GB News. Thanks for your time. Chris, just tell me a little bit about your first reaction to what Prince Harry has said in his new memoir.
I think, the first thing that sort of sprung to mind was just how poorly judged his comments were, and how embarrassing, really, and very much a betrayal as well. All of us in the army swear an oath of allegiance to the monarch, to, at the time, her heirs and successors. And not only has he betrayed that oath of allegiance, sworn as an army officer, but it's actually his own family as well. And then to do so for money, it's just truly sad. Very, very, very disappointing.
What does this mean for the security, though, of Prince Harry and the royal family? Because doesn't this put some kind of target on his back?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about our experiences in combat, quite often people might relate an experience in combat in some sort of context. Very rarely will any soldier, sailor, airman, any member of the armed forces, serving or veteran, talk about the number of kills that they've engaged in. And I think, that's very, very rare. It may be done in context, in private. You certainly would never do so in a book, not as publicly as he has done. So I think, that's coupled with the fact that he uses terms like chess pieces, he dehumanizes them. I think, that could very, very easily cause some serious repercussions. And I think not just to his own personal security, but the wider security of the royal family, and actually to the servicemen and women on operations across the world at the moment right now.
Do you know what, Cameron? That's what I was going to ask Major Chris Hunter there. It's not just his security, it's the whole royal family's security, it's the greater army's security. And what does that mean to him now? Is the country going to have to provide him with security?
Chris, would you like to come in on that? With the
What's
fact
the
that
fallout?
What is the fallout in terms of him being a former British Army soldier?
Well, I think, there isn't a sort of a precedent for this. Short of his great uncle when he abdicated the throne. Sorry, his great grandfather. Yeah, what would he be? Great uncle, yeah, when he abdicated the throne. I think he, there isn't any sort of precedent for, in terms of protection, when somebody decides or, leaves the royal family and goes their own way. I think the fact that he talked about going to do this to protect the privacy of him and his family, and the fact that he's so publicly making money from this, monetizing everything he's doing, the fact that he's, they're talking about it being the worst crisis in the monarchy in 30 years, potentially it's going to be a greater disaster than that as well in terms of the impact on the monarchy. Does he deserve any security? He lives in the United States. Who's going to provide that security? Does the public have the appetite to actually provide any security to him? And I think, just everything he talked about, when he talked about this diatribe about 911 being the reason why he justified the killings, that just didn't sound like the words of any sort of soldier or veteran. It sounded immature, it sounded unintelligent, it sounded disingenuous, like it was just written to sell books. And every time I and my colleagues, when we talk about this, hear anything else coming out about Harry and Meghan, it just seems to be complete inconsistencies and all about making money. And I'm afraid it just feels like he's forgotten, what his personal values were all about.
Well, I'm sure this conversation is going to rumble on. Major Chris Hunter, thank you so much for your time.
I just wondered, Tessa, do you think that, there's been a lot of controversy about Harry wanting to continue with security, the state providing him with security, and there was a lot of argy-bargy over whether they should or shouldn't. You don't think that this is some kind of bizarre tactic to try and get state-funded security for him, do you?
It's not as thought through as that. I find it extraordinary people are so indignant about Harry talking of his military experiences. SAS books sell really well. They're not unprecedented. They're not necessarily popular with serving members of the SAS, but they exist. I'm someone who writes about the Second World War. I've interviewed veterans. I've asked them about, death toll, both on them, on their families, and anyone that they was in their line of fire. So I think that this sort of moral indignation we're all having at the moment is perhaps a little over-ramped. What did we expect Harry to put in a memoir? This is a man who was brought up in institutions in Eton, in the British Army, and in the royal household, and he's left all three. So, yeah, he's freewheeling. He's a loose cannon, quite literally. And re-security, remember, against the advice of our security,
I come in there, Tessa, I think it is completely tasteless what he's done, and I think that Major Hunter had it right. It was anything for a couple of silver shillings, as it were. He talked about how he lost his virginity. It's like you've gone through a book and you've said, where have I got the headlines that I can sell to, whether it's the Mail or the Washington Post, this, that, the other, losing your virginity, what other line, taking cocaine, how many people he's killed. I think it's just tasteless drops of information.
Penguin Random House has reportedly paid him $20 million up front for this book. So clearly they are going to want stories which are sellable in order for them to make a profit. So it appears that that Prince Harry has resorted to these kind of derogatory or intimate statements.
Simon, I just wondered, he seems to be thrashing around trying to blame the royal family members for everything. The one that made me sort of, I don't know if it made me wince or smile, was when he even claimed that Prince William had forced him to wear the Nazi uniform that he'd got into trouble for. I thought the line of I was just following orders was probably not really a particularly appropriate one for saying why he'd wore a Nazi uniform. He doesn't seem to be wanting to take responsibility for anything he's ever done.
It's a really sad situation. I think he's in a really bad place. I think he's badly affected by Meghan Markle. And I think the bigger point is that he needs to be increasingly detached from the royal family. The public in Britain just don't expect to have somebody like this in the royal family. No security, no money from the royal family, no title.
Just very quick. We've got lots to go on. I have a quick question. You have a quick question, Phil.
Last time we spoke, the royal family's position was that they weren't going to respond to any of these. Is that still their position, that they're just going to let this carry on and they're not going to respond to anything that he says?
Yeah, that appears to be their position. And to be honest, I think that never complain, never explain strategy that they've clearly got going on is working. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are still very much the least popular members of the royal family in terms of the British public, according to the latest YouGov poll, apart from Prince Andrew.
Right. Well, the only questions I had to ask is, one, he's now opening up the whole question about his parentage, which he's done that by saying what Charles said, questioned whether he was the father. And the other thing, he might have crossed the red line about Camilla. We've got no time. We're going to have to bring you back in the next hour to answer those questions. But coming up, we'll be also asking whether maths should be taught until the age of 18 in the UK. Don't go anywhere, but first it's the news with Rhiannon.
Esther, thank you. It's 10:30 for your top stories from the GB newsroom. Prince Harry says he saw a red mist in Prince William during an argument with him, claiming his brother wanted Harry to hit him back, but he chose not to. In a new trailer for ITV's interview with the Duke of Sussex, he talks about the alleged physical attack by Prince William in 2019, detailed in his memoir Spare. He describes his brother's level of frustration and compares it to similar feelings he experienced for many years. The royal also says he wants reconciliation with his family, but first he says there needs to be accountability. Former royal correspondent Charles Ray told us this could be the end of Harry's relationship with the royal family.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
Passengers are experiencing yet more travel disruption on the fourth consecutive day of train strikes. RMT and 14 operators have walked out over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services are operating as normal. Negotiations are expected to continue next week. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he hopes the talks will be constructive. The unions are accusing the government of blocking a deal. Ukraine's calling Russia's order for a 36-hour ceasefire a trick. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow will use the time to regroup their forces. Kyiv wants the Kremlin's troops to leave occupied territories before a temporary truce can happen. It's set to start at noon today. The Health Secretary is signing an agreement today that he says could speed up research into cancer treatments. Steve Barclay says the deal with BioNTech means cancer patients in England will get early access to experimental trials, including cancer vaccines. In total, 10,000 doses of personalised therapies could be delivered to patients by 2030. And former Chelsea striker and manager Gianluca Vialli has died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 58. Vialli earned 59 caps for Italy and won the Champions League with Juventus before joining Chelsea in 1996. He was the first Italian to manage a Premier League side, becoming a player manager for the Blues in 1998. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:39. You've all been getting in touch with your views this morning, Esther.
Yeah,
What have you
Patricia
got?
says, this is a jealous boy. She's talking about Harry, not yet a man, who's been grabbed and the rivalry stoked by a competitive spouse who thinks they should be front and centre. The day the money stops rolling is when Harry will be dumped by her, I'm guessing.
Carol says, Harry, with his comments about how many Taliban he killed, has put other royals at risk, as well as him and his children. The government should ban him from the coronation as a security risk. This would also relieve Charles from the problem of inviting him.
By the way, big point that about the coronation, because this could actually overshadow that. And Mark says, the perfect match of troubled childhood toxicity. He says he wants to make things up with the royal family. Well, he's not going the right way about doing it.
Now, Rishi Sunak has said he's looking at plans to ensure all school pupils in England study maths in some form or another until the age of 18, saying he wanted people to feel confident when it came to their finances.
In his speech, the Prime Minister said the UK must reimagine its approach to numeracy, adding that we would be letting our children down by not ensuring they have relevant skills in data and statistics when they enter the workplace.
Joining us now is head teacher and president of the Association of School and College Leaders, Evelyn Ford. Evelyn, thank you very much for joining us. So what did you make of what Rishi Sunak had to say? Was he onto something by saying that people should keep studying some form of maths until they're 18?
Thanks for having me. Good morning. I think I've got three things to say, actually, if you could just give me the time. I think I'd like to start with the positive. I think we have a Prime Minister who's actually talking about education. The profession, for far too long, under previous leaders, we've always felt as if it's a bit of an afterthought. So that's really positive. It's positive we have a Secretary of State for Education who understands the importance of vocational education. She seems to get that having a broad and balanced curriculum will give people of all ages and stages the ability to have opportunities for a great career. So that's amazing, really positive there. However, that's where my positivity ends in terms of answering your question, because my second point is, I haven't seen the evidence for it. I think it's really important that the government sets out the evidence for extending maths for all students to the age of 18, because the changes will be affecting generations for life, for years to come. So where's the evidence to suggest that that's the right way forward? But the most important thing, and this is where school and college leaders, I believe, are up in arms, is we cannot recruit for love nor money. The recruitment and retention crisis it's really, really stressful in schools at the moment. So to extend maths to the ages of 18, when actually you haven't got teachers in the classroom now, I believe our Prime Minister is a bit misguided. I'd like him to come and walk in my shoes. I'd like him to look at my cover list, whereby if I haven't got substantive teachers, I'm trying to get supply teachers, and then I can't even get supply teachers. How on earth are we in the profession going to be able to offer maths post 18, up to 18? I think there's other priorities in my view.
But Evelyn, I guess it's not that Rishi's proposing that it's sort of pure maths and trigonometry and all the rest of it that people are going to be learning, as I understood it. It was more about sort of the life skills, things of learning about your finances and budgeting and some of the skills that you would need in the workplace when you left work, adding to that emphasis on vocational education. So, I mean, isn't that something that everyone can agree is something that would be worthwhile for people?
But we do that now. I mean, if you look at the maths curriculum now, we teach all that, we teach the basics. You take maths at A level, you're kind of advancing your knowledge and expertise. But the reality is, and there have been some statistics around the number of non-specialist maths teachers that are already in our classrooms. There was a study done by the Times Education Supplement, and they noted that the government has actually missed its own trainee target for maths teachers. So if we can't get maths teachers in the classroom now, where on earth are we going to get them to extend maths up to the age of 18? I think it's the fact he's talking about education is great, but the fact that we have a recruitment and retention crisis, that's where I would like the conversation to start. I would like him to come and help the profession to actually get more teachers into the classroom to teach not just maths, history, geography, across the board. It is extremely difficult to recruit and retain teachers in the profession.
Evelyn Ford, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you for what you do.
Now, I want to look at the issue that we have got that, and that is 8 million people in the country who have the numeracy of primary school pupils. So there is a problem, and maybe, because I think there are lots of things that have to be put in place to be teaching people maths, but we do have to raise this issue of that lack of maths, finance and a bit,
I think
numeracy.
is onto something here, I really do. I'm terrible at maths, really poor at maths, and it would have benefited me had I studied maths better and more. So I think he's onto something. I think he has to fund it, he has to support it, but it will improve productivity, it will improve people's personal skills in terms of dealing with the finances. I think he can achieve something.
I don't want to always be the bar humbug at this table.
Well, I was going to ask
That's what you're here for, Tessa.
No, because I have a slightly sort of different view and think that focus for maths needs to come a lot earlier.
Thank you.
Because it's actually the age of 4 is where the sort of separation comes out. And if you're from a disadvantaged background, 60% of you will sort of drop out of even wanting to do it. So I think the teaching needs to be questioned. Is it fun? Is it exciting? Are you making people like the subject or not?
And actually, key, exiting primary school, we are still underserving a third of our pupils. They are not up to standards in the 3 R's, arithmetic, reading and writing. If you lose them then, you ain't going to pick them up again aged 18. This was Rishi Sunak, the financer, the banker. We too could be as rich as you, Rishi, if we do our sums. Now, I didn't buy.
But I did think people who are interested in maths should also be persuaded to go into it, because you need an aptitude to go that high up, and then I think that's career advice.
But they will probably succeed anyway, those kids.
Anyway, we're moving on to something which you may also have an opinion about, Tessa. Who knows?
Well, we hope she does, because that's why she's here.
So 3 female guards have been jailed for having illicit affairs with inmates at the biggest prison in the UK, leading to the launch of an anti-corruption programme.
The News takes the saying that everyone loves a bad boy to a whole new level. And it's got us thinking about what is it that dangerous men, or why are dangerous men so appealing to some women?
Joining us now is leading dating and relationship expert Kezia Noble. Kezia, thank you for joining us. So, just pose that question from Esther. Why are dangerous and bad people so attractive to so many women?
Obviously, I defy that rule, but go on.
Well, there are aspects and traits of the bad boy that appeal to women. So women aren't drawn to a bad person as such. It's more the traits of a bad boy, if that makes sense. So, for instance, with a bad boy, you can't second guess him. He's a bit of a dark horse. That's always exciting. He's a little bit rebellious. He questions authority. He's not a pushover. He keeps us on our toes. And you can't tame him so easily as a nice guy. And that really appeals to women. Women like a challenge. So those are the aspects of the bad boy that women find quite appealing.
Hold on, I'm just writing these down. I'm sure...
I managed to think I wasn't getting a bad boy and I wouldn't have a challenge and all of those things. But unfortunately, see, they can come in different guises, and this good boy turned out to be a bad boy.
I mean, these people are... these in terms of these prisoners and criminals, obviously they're manipulative people. I mean, do you think that, in effect, they've been drawn into something that they rather wish they hadn't? Or do you think that the danger of the situation was part of the appeal for them?
Probably initially it was, that drama is quite exciting. It's a little bit different. That can be attractive to some women. But what happens is, as I said before, there's bad boy traits and then there's bad people. So, for instance, a bad person or a bad guy, he has more toxic traits. He plays on a woman's insecurities, cheats, gaslights, more controlling. And, in the kind of more sort of extreme end of the spectrum will be quite aggressive also. So there is that fine line that women have to be careful of.
I would also say here, as you had a prison officer with a prisoner, there's definitely power imbalances there. So did these women think they were going to be in control but not understand the sort of manipulation of the prisoners? I mean, obviously, they've suffered the consequences. These female prison officers are now behind bars. So what was that power imbalance there going on?
It could have, yeah. I mean, these women, they're powerful in the sense, of their workplace. And then there is this kind of opportunity where the power's shifted again. Can be quite appealing. But I think what it was initially is the excitement that the bad boy gives, that he offers women. And then, unfortunately, woman, by some point, starts developing feelings for that man. And then she can't see them sort of more toxic things that he's doing.
Kezia Noble, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you. And
explaining those sort of power imbalances.
Tessa, do you like a bad boy? Are you?
Well, funnily enough, and this may or may not surprise you, I once volunteered in a prison in my errant youth. I shadowed the prison chaplain in Shepton Mallet. Which at the time is one of the oldest prisons in Britain, and only out of one window could you see grass. So it was a pretty austere place, and it was a male prison. And I was very struck. I was in my early 20s, by the way. I'd just left university. I was very struck, and I did flag this up with the chaplain, just how aesthetically impressive some of the prisoners were.
And is this a confessional?
Yes. he explained to me why. He said, well, huge numbers in prison. The majority is because of drugs. If you were the guy with the drugs, you're the cool guy. You're often the good-looking guy. The girls go for you. There's a kind of set up there.
There's the gyms.
Yeah, and also they build up. They're not building up their humanity in prison. They're building up their bodies. They've got time to do that. So there's brawn, and there's also they've got the chutzpah outside the prison where these were the guys who kind of had the chicks and walked the line. And I was very struck by that. Obviously, it was an entirely professional role I had, and I was very much shadowing the chaplain.
So is there an argument here for saying that we shouldn't have female prison officers in male prisons?
No. There isn't. There are guidelines. One has to be aware of vulnerabilities, of pitfalls, and that's why you have to make sure you make the right decisions about staffing, and also there's decent training for staff.
Simon.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm the best person to give relationship advice, but
are you a bad boy? Are
you going after a bad woman? Is that a good boy after a bad woman?
The woman I
nearly pointed at me then, but I meant Tessa.
But I agree with Tessa. I don't think it's funny where relationships spring up, isn't it? And I think it happens in prisons. It happens in all workplaces. So there's some inevitability about it. But you have to have guidelines and follow those. Yeah, but it is interesting.
OK, an inevitability then. So better oversight, maybe, that wasn't happening here. But look, the next thing we're going to talk about is, according to a brand new report, 66% of people in the UK have a desire to lose weight by, on average, and this is what I couldn't get over, on average 2 stone this year, with 77% of the nation saying they feel stuck in a rut when it comes to dieting.
What are you looking at me for?
I wasn't. Read the next link. He always does the sympathy, doesn't he?
The report, titled Weight of the Nation, said that more than 16 million Brits have been reduced to tears because of their weight, and 4 in 10 of those with weight concerns also have anxiety.
Well, joining us now is nutritionist Mark Gilbert and transformation coach Deborah Adams, who herself has lost a whopping 8 stone in weight. So first of all, congratulations there, Deborah. But my first question, when we heard so many people cried over where they saw themselves and wanted to lose weight, is this what got you on your journey to lose weight? I mean, were you one of those people who cried, said, this isn't me? I need a new me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I had a horrendous pregnancy with a long hospital stay, and I had gained 8 stones during that time. And I remember the doctors coming along and saying to me that if you don't get that weight off, you will have a heart attack within the next 7 years. So I was 8 stones overweight. And you hear that news and you think, I don't want to have a heart attack. I need to live. So I was, very anxious. And I knew that I needed some support to get that weight off, which is where the one-to-one diet came in.
How did you lose 8 stone, Deborah? It's an amazing achievement. How did you actually go about doing it?
Okay, so for me, I looked online. I found myself a one-to-one diet consultant, Sharon and Lawrence at the time, because I recognised that doing it on my own just wasn't working. All right, you told me to have 3 biscuits, I'm going to have 5. So I needed somebody who was going to actually give me that support.
You're not a dunker of biscuits as well. A dunker.
I know the feeling.
All right, I was an emotional eater, and all the things that a lot of people, can resonate with. So for me, I recognised that I needed some accountability and some real support. So I went and got myself a coach who, guided me through. So for me, with the one-to-one diet, there are several steps, but for me, I did a combination of meal replacements and a healthy meal that I prepared myself of protein and vegetables. And I worked with them on changing my mindset, which was absolutely key. So when I was stressed and, feeling anxious, I didn't turn to food. I found other things to do, like audiobooks, walking, gardening, and things like that.
Mark, I think that's an important thing there, is know where your weakness is and know when you're going to turn to the biscuit tin. Mark, what would you sort of recommend people do?
Well, like Deborah mentioned, and probably nothing I say is as impressive as how much weight Deborah's lost successfully. But one thing that she mentioned was protein, and you should build, if you want to maintain or lose weight, or if you want to have a healthy old age or stronger bones or stronger muscles, you should build all of your meals and snacks around protein, because protein, literally the word comes from first or primary. It's the most important nutrient. And protein has 2 kind of magic tricks. One is it boosts your metabolic rate more than the equivalent calories in carbohydrates or fats. And the other thing it does is it reduces your hunger signals more than carbohydrates or fats. So if protein were a drug, it would be a very successful drug.
I mean, Mark, for those of us who are wanting to lose weight, I hear lots of different options. There's the Atkins diet, there's the 800 calories a day, there's just one meal a day, all this kind of thing. I mean, do they all work, or should some be avoided?
Well, the one thing that all good nutritionists agree with these days, and there's not too many things, if you get enough nutritionists in a room, that they'll all agree with, but one thing is that no diet works the same for any 2 people. You give 10 people the same diet, you're going to get 10 different results. And that's something we do at the one-to-one diet. We have a bespoke one-to-one relationship, like Deborah was saying, with her consultant. They're trained. Most of them have been through the weight loss journey. And they will take into account your lifestyle. We have a medical department that makes sure that any health issues are taken care of. So we purposely investigate the person's lifestyle, the foods they like, the foods they've done well on in the past, and vice versa. And we set up a bespoke nutritional program for the person. And that can include exclusively these...
Can I just ask one more quick question to Deborah there? Deborah, do you now constantly think still about food and what you can and can't do? Or actually, have you trained yourself so well now it's just part of your life and your habits?
Trained myself, and now it is a part of my life. And then what I do now, like with a lot of people that have been the journey, I now support other people to do the same. So I am, if you're a food addict, food is always going to be on your mind. So it was just about, now I've trained myself. So I eat when I'm hungry, not just for, just dipping my hands into the biscuit tin or the chocolates or the quality foods.
Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. You're definitely an inspiration for all those people at the start of the new year who want to lose weight. Thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up, should the Elgin marbles be returned to Greece? We'll be joined by former Culture Minister, Lord Ed Vaizey, and we'll also be speaking to an archaeologist who believes they should remain here in the UK.
And other parties of the right going to unite. We'll be joined by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, to talk about that and much more.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. We've got lots coming up for you this hour.
And we've certainly had a lively debate during that break, particularly about whether you should lose weight if you're a woman, if you're a little bit older, just saying. Anyway, we will be speaking to former Culture Minister Ed Vaizey about whether the Elgin Marble should remain here in the UK or be returned back to Greece.
We'll also be asking Richard Tice about his plans for the Reform Party in 2023 and whether parties on the right should unite.
And keep those views coming in this morning. Email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. First, though, here's the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. Your top stories in the GB newsroom. Prince Harry says he saw a red mist in Prince William during an argument with him, claiming his brother wanted Harry to hit him back, but he chose not to. In a new trailer for ITV's interview with the Duke of Sussex, he talks about the alleged physical attack by Prince William in 2019, detailed in his memoir, Spare. He describes his brother's level of frustration and compares it to similar feelings he experienced for many years. The royal also says he wants reconciliation with his family, but first there needs to be accountability, he says. Former royal correspondent Charles Ray told us this could be the end of Harry's relationship with the royal family.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
The Prime Minister's invited union leaders representing striking workers to meet with him on Monday. Rishi Sunak says he hopes for a grown-up conversation about what's affordable. It comes as passengers experience the fourth consecutive day of train strikes over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services are operating as normal. Mr Sunak says the government could legislate to ensure some services continue during strike action.
We're going to bring forward new laws in common with countries like France, Italy, Spain and others that ensure that we have minimum levels of safety in critical areas like fire, like ambulance, so that even when strikes are going on, you know that your health will be protected. I think that's entirely reasonable and that's what our new laws will do.
RMT's Secretary-General Mike Lynch, meanwhile, says he doesn't think potential new laws will work.
They've also lost the argument on the existing anti-trade union laws because every union is defeating them by having mass ballots. They want to make the action that comes out of those ballots virtually illegal. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they understand what they're doing. They keep quoting what goes on in France and Spain and all the rest of the world. These laws have never been enforced in those countries, and they're not enacted in the same way that Grant Shapps is trying to bring in.
Mick Lynch speaking there. The Health Secretary signing an agreement today that it says could speed up research into cancer treatments. Steve Barclay says the deal with BioNTech means cancer patients in England will get early access to experimental trials, including cancer vaccines. In total, 10,000 doses of personalised therapies could be delivered to patients by 2030. Shell will pay around £1.7 billion in UK and EU windfall taxes for the final quarter of last year. The oil giant says it'll face a hit to earnings because of the increased UK energy profits levy and additional EU taxes. In October, bosses at the firm had said they hadn't paid any UK windfall taxes because of heavy investment in the North Sea. Tech bosses should be held legally responsible for harmful online content, according to a new poll. The NSPCC says 66% of adults want managers to be prosecuted for failure that results in serious harm to children. It's urging the government to strengthen the online safety bill when it returns to Parliament later this month. The children's charity estimates more than 21,000 online child sexual offences will have been recorded by police since the legislation was delayed last summer. And former Chelsea striker and manager Gianluca Vialli has died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 58. First diagnosed in 2017, he was given the all clear a year later, only for the illness to return. Vialli earned 59 caps for Italy and won the Champions League with Juventus before joining Chelsea in 1996. He was the first Italian to manage a Premier League side, becoming player manager for the Blues in 1998. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rhiannon. It's nearly, well, just gone 11:05, and we've been getting lots of views in from you there. A lot about Harry and what he's doing wrong.
Yeah, Mark says, good on him for outing his views. Through publishing his book, Harry has taken control of his own destiny. My only criticism is the mention of his Afghan tour and the killings. This is a no-go area, and he's got this part very wrong.
Jack says, Harry is a silly man. I'm a veteran and I'm ashamed of him for talking about his kills and dehumanising the enemy. They're just doing a job the same as us. Harry has really put his family in danger.
And Christine says, definitely no security paid by UK taxpayers. He's made his bed and he can now lie in it.
Janice says this book is the last straw for the British public and the royal family alike. And on a different subject, and this was, we were talking about compulsory maths to the age of 18, Peter says, I think it's a really poor idea, forcing students to take maths beyond GCSE. It can breed resentment and disinterest. Shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, Cavill says most children don't like maths at any age. Since when do we need the Prime Minister deciding what subjects we need? In my opinion, there are far more important things we need to learn.
Now, we were talking about, we're getting our guests up as we speak, about the British Museum confirming that it will be looking at trying to have a constructive conversation about returning the Elgin marbles. And I'm wondering, is this a big issue? Should we keep them? Should they go back? Tessa?
I once again have to object from the get-go with the editorial line, no less, of your channel. They are not the Elgin marbles. They are the Parthenon marbles. Yeah. And there should be no should. Yes, they must go back. And the equivocal statement...
We can put it into a little bit of history so people understand, because obviously they're called the Elgin marbles. That's how we got them. It was Lord Elgin who brought them back at a time where Greece was occupied during the Ottoman sort of period, and he took them back. And then the question is, did we get them correctly? did we go through the right procedures, or did we take them from another country?
But it's bigger than that, because even if we did get them correctly, don't forget we were hand in glove with the Ottomans, because they were the wonderful buffer for our British Empire. So, of course, we got what we wanted. Lord Elgin, he was a soldier, a diplomat. He stripped 75 metres of priceless frieze, dumped it in boats, took it over for his own private collection initially, incidentally. But the upshot is today you have the emergence of Greece, you have the Greek Wars of independence, you have this Balkan country, a perfidious Balkan country who we didn't trust and didn't really approve of. And by the way, we certainly didn't like the fact Prince Philip was Greek. So remember, we have this one idea of an ancient Greek culture, which we partly own as our own, and we have a separate idea of modern Greece not able to look after its own kit.
But I wonder, Simon, does it go bigger than this now? Is this about all artefacts that in one way or another we've taken from other countries? It's their culture, it's their heritage, and we've got them in our museums. Should they all start going back?
I completely disagree with Tessa. I think we should keep them. I really do. I think you're setting a precedent that's just not acceptable, and we are where we are in history, and I think we should maintain what we've got, look after it well. We present it very well. Economically, it's very positive for the United Kingdom. This is where they are, and this is where they should stay.
It's actually making us look like we're behind the curve. I don't know if you know your history, Simon. They are the soul of Greece. There is a beautiful Acropolis museum in location from which you can see the Parthenon, where 2,500 years these were created and installed. How can you suggest they belong in a dusty hall in the British Museum?
Well, I just think they should stay in the United Kingdom. Perhaps they should be better presented. I've seen them, they look very good, and they're a real attraction, but they are in the United Kingdom. This is where they are, and this is where I think they should stay.
And many people can see them at the British Museum.
Shall we...
we can now.
Now Tessa's got us all...
Did you see I was leaning across?
The reason there is such a long table is to keep everybody safe.
Anyway, just in case you hadn't noticed, the British Museum confirmed for the first time it's involved in constructive discussions with Greece over the return of some of the Elgin marbles, Parthenon marbles, call them what you want. We're calling them Elgin marbles for now.
But former Chancellor George Osborne, who is now the museum's chairman, is believed to have drawn up an agreement that would repatriate the 2,500-year-old cultural treasures.
In a Times article written this week, former Culture Minister Lord Vasey said that returning the marbles would reunify one of the most significant works of art in history, and we're delighted to say that Ed joins us now. Ed, thanks ever so much for taking the time to join us. I guess it begs the question, you were the Culture Minister for so many years. These were owned by the government that were sort of, in effect, given to the British Museum. Why did you not insist that they were returned to Greece when you were the minister and might have had some say over these things?
Well, Philip, that's because I have two key character traits that you're very familiar with, having served with me in the House of Commons. One is extreme laziness, and the other is cowardice. And I was lazy in the sense I didn't do the proper research as to why the Parthenon sculptures should really go back to Athens. And I was a coward because as Culture Minister, I would have had to disagree with Neil MacGregor, who was then head of the British Museum, who presented a really formidable case for why the Elgin marbles should stay in the British Museum. He rebranded the British Museum effectively as a world museum and said that many more people would see them in the context of other civilizations as they came to the British Museum. But once I was freed from the burden of office and started to look at the issue in more detail, I came to realise that I'd been completely wrong as the Culture Minister. And this is one of those unanswerable cases where these sculptures should be returned, because really it is one work of art, and it is like tearing the Mona Lisa in half and sending one half to Britain and keeping another half in Paris. They should be reunited in one piece, and they should be reunited where they were made, where they were displayed in Athens.
Has this... Hang on a sec. Do you think in the last decade things have moved on as well, Ed? Do you think people are saying, we want our heritage back? Do you think the shout for this is getting louder, and not maybe just from Greece, from other places around the world wanting their artefacts back? And is this going to be the start of other people wanting them back?
So the Greeks have been campaigning pretty much since their independence to get the marbles back. But I do think there has been a shift in sort of public opinion, which is, again, an area, a contentious area, the sort of thing that gets Phil absolutely fulminating, because it's what we're really talking about, of course, is what some people might describe as woke culture. But there is definitely a feeling that a lot of some objects in our museums were obtained in rather dubious circumstances, the Benin bronzes being an extremely good example. And there is also an understanding, I think, that more and more countries, have a strong identity and great curation habits. I've no idea whose dog that is barking. For once, it is not my dog barking in the background.
It's not ours either. It's your next door neighbour's, Ed. Have a word.
It's definitely not. My dog normally does interrupt pretty much every single interview I do, but this time she is innocent. So I do think there has been a change of culture and a recognition that some objects are kind of integral to a country's identity, and we should discuss. Now, I don't think, Esther, behind your question, I don't think there will be a flood of objects leaving the UK going back to the countries of origin. I think we could set up an independent committee which could make recommendations. We already have, for example, the Spoliation Committee, which quite rightly returns works of art that were looted during the Second World War by the Nazis. And we ourselves in the UK have had for 70 years the Reviewing Committee for the Export of Works of Art. And that identifies objects which are sold, which might be integral to British culture, and stops them being exported. The most notorious one I was involved in was Jane Austen's engagement ring, which was bought by the American pop star Kelly Clarkson, and I put an export bar on it, and Jane Austen's museum bought it.
Ed, just very quickly, you said that some of these artefacts have been acquired sort of in a dubious manner. Are you saying that about the Elgin marbles? Because obviously, in Parliament said that the collection had been obtained legitimately at the time, and that's why they were happy to purchase them from Lord Elgin. Are you saying in effect that you felt that he acquired these things in a dubious manner, or do you accept that they were acquired legitimately?
To a certain extent, the legal debate is a red herring. I'm not being rude to you, Phil, but it can take us down a cul-de-sac. But in effect, yes, I am saying that, because even at the time, people were dubious about Lord Elgin's right to take the marbles. He took them from the Ottomans, who were the occupying power. It's very doubtful whether the contract he effectively signed with the ruler of Athens was legitimate and allowed him to actually remove the marbles rather than study them. There are all sorts of doubts. It certainly would be very easily contested in court, whether you could never say for certain which way a court case would go. But the idea that this was a kind of very clean, clear bill of sales is absolutely for the birds.
Ed Vasey, thanks very much in there, who is advocating a return of the marbles. Let's now welcome someone who believes that keeping the Elgin marbles would be to keep our British values. That's Dr. Mario Trabucco della Toretto. So, how does it mean that we're keeping our British values if these are Greek pieces of art?
Hello. Thank you for having me on the program. First of all, because we strongly believe as British people, and we always have defended and advocated the rule of law. Now, this acquisition, despite what Lord Vasey is maintaining just now, was already established as perfectly legal, because Lord Elgin got a permission from the legitimate and internationally recognized authority over Athens. Let's remind ourselves that the Acropolis was a military fortress, and this military fortress was under the command of the Grand Vizier, who was the supreme commander of the Ottoman army. And Lord Elgin got the permission from the deputy Grand Vizier, because the Grand Vizier was in Egypt fighting the French. So he got his permission, and everybody knew at the time that Athens was an integral part of the Ottoman Empire. I'm not buying this thing that Athens was under occupation. Occupation is by nature temporary. and it doesn't presuppose a change. It is marked by no change in allegiance. The population of Athens instead knew perfectly well that their rulers were the Ottomans, and obviously there was also part of self-ruling because they were part of the millet system, where basically the Greek Orthodox Church was part of the ruling party in Athens at the time. And none of these people actually was voicing any particular objections to the marble being shipped away. Let's also remember.
Mario, just to say, I mean, you talk about the rule of law, and we sort of had that debate, and I've got a lot of sympathy for your point. But in terms of that, these were gifted in effect by Parliament to the British Museum. If the British Museum want to return them to Greece, why should they not be able to?
First of all, because there is an Act of Parliament, British Museum Act 1963, that basically bars the British Museum from alienating any piece of their collection unless it's unfit for purpose, basically. And there's no one on earth that can say that the marbles are unfit to stay in the British Museum. And this provision was inserted in this act and similar acts for all our national museums, because obviously we don't want once items of very important value for our own identity or for the history of mankind get into these museums to just get away from these museums. For example, we have seen a huge debate about the
Dr.
Wellcome
Mario,
collection.
we're going to bring this back to the studio as well. We've got two guests with. We've got Simon and Tessa. Simon, should they go back to the country of origin?
No, I agree with the academic. I think they should stay in Britain. I think it's a really important point. And Ed Vaizey mentioned woke culture, and I think that's what it is. I think it's woke culture that's saying everything should be repatriated, we should do X, Y and Z, and I think it's just going in the wrong direction, and it's something we will regret doing.
Tessa, I mean, in essence, I mean, it seems that most people accept that they were acquired legitimately. People might say, well, but legally, at any rate, legally. So what does it matter, really? I mean, surely the thing is the key thing is that as many people as possible enjoy them and enjoy what they are. And I suspect more people will be able to enjoy them in the British Museum than if they return to Greece.
Really? You think that Athens is less accessible in some way than London? Athens, a key city in the EU with a brand new Acropolis Museum and guaranteed sunshine. I would suggest that we're on the back foot on every front. At the moment, I mean, you can look at the statistics. I think about 6 million go into the British Museum, but how many go into that hall? I won't go in. I find it so offensive they remain on British soil. It makes us look terrible. This is, I'm going to say it once more, the soul of Greece, but it speaks to us more deeply than that. Please note that self-confessed Lord Lazy Ed Vaizey, George Osborne, public schoolboys weaned on the nipple of ancient Greek education, thinking somehow that this is their world. No, it belongs to modern Greece.
So I'm a pragmatist.
Yeah.
And I'd say if we do move on to a new area and they do go back to the country of origin, because I've been looking at how do we have positive relationships between the two countries. Is there something that we could get out of it?
We've had them for 200 years. Have we not benefited enough?
No, I don't mean that. I mean, if we are moving on, is there other things? So they could say you could have some other displays that we're not using at the moment. Is there a cycle of goods and museum pieces that aren't being looked at the moment? Is there a better relationship we can have with one another in our countries? I'm just saying, let's move it on. Should we be moving on?
Well, London is an international city. That's the reality.
But so's Athens.
And Philip's right. People come to London to see this sort of thing. It's a major attraction. And that's how it should stay. I mean, it's part of our heritage.
Can I tell you, I'd happily go to Athens on a holiday and go and look at them in their rightful place. Just putting it out there.
All I know is if I'd acquired something legally and then somebody down the road said, I want them back, I'd feel a bit aggrieved, personally. That's how I feel about it.
Our viewers can let us know, are you maybe thinking, like, maybe time to move on, hand them back? Or do you think, once they're yours, that they are yours? Well, coming up after the break, are we seeing a return to the days ruled by the lockdown measures? We'll be asking Professor David Payton on his thoughts on that, and that's where now people are saying we need to go back to wearing masks. What you do think? We'll be discussing that after this break, so don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's nearly 11:30 now. With flu and COVID cases on the rise and the NHS under pressure, we've seen the inevitable calls for the return of some of the restrictions we saw during lockdown, such as mask wearing. And there's even been a Labour MP calling for mandatory isolation. Well, we're now joined by Professor David Payton to talk about this. So these siren calls for masks to come back, mandatory isolation, what's your views?
Well, it's rather depressing. And actually, if you look at the latest data, COVID cases now seem to be decreasing. So hospital admissions have gone down about 14% over the past couple of weeks in COVID. The situation with flu is perhaps, it's still a serious situation. I think what is depressing is that there seems to be a tendency to say, well, we have to do something, without necessarily thinking whether that something is going to have much benefit and what costs it's going to have. And we see that with masks. Every time some people seem to be desperate to bring back compulsory masks, mask mandates. Actually, the evidence for their benefit is very, very weak. There's lots of research papers out there. Some do show some small benefit from masks. Others show the opposite, actually, say that masks can sometimes make things worse. And we do know that they also have some adverse effects. They can be uncomfortable. For some people, they can cause panic attacks and so on. So I think policymakers need to start to think, okay, is what we're doing sensible? Is there a significant benefit? What are the costs? And if we're going to force people to do something, you need a really high bar. You need to be sure that you're not going to be causing more harm than good. And I think that as a general approach to thinking about interventions, things would really get better if politicians started thinking along those lines.
David, I guess people are very confused about this because they hear on one hand people say that these masks are completely pointless. On the other hand, I mean, I was reading Tricia Greenhalgh, Professor of Primary Healthcare at Oxford and member of Independent Sage, who said the science of masks is not complex, nor is it conflicting. Science shows very clearly that masking is effective in reducing transmissions of SARS, COVID. This has been shown in laboratory studies, natural experiments, modelling studies, and randomised controlled trials. So, I mean, is she talking absolute rubbish there? Or, I mean, it is very confusing for people to know whether or not these things do make a difference or not.
Yeah, and I'm afraid that is a misrepresentation if that's what she said. There have only been 2 randomised controlled trials of masks for COVID. One is a Bangladesh study which found some benefit, but only for surgical masks, not for cloth masks, and the mask mandates we have allow people to wear any masks they like. The other randomised control on Danish data showed no significant effect at all. Now, you can find some studies, as I've said, which find some effects and others which don't. And I think that the confusion reflects that the evidence is rather weak. So you look at the summaries of evidence, they tend to say the evidence base is sort of weak to moderate. That's sort of the technical term they use for how good the quality of evidence is. And what we can also see from the general data, so for example, the times when England had a mask mandate and Scotland didn't, it's very hard to see any difference in the patterns of COVID cases. So we can't be absolutely sure there's no effect at all, but what we can say is that any effect is not big enough to be noticeable in the data. And I'll just give you one example of one of the studies, which looked at mask wearing by teachers in primary schools in Wales. Now, they found that teachers who wore masks were actually slightly more likely to get COVID, also more likely to report flu and cold symptoms. And what they found was quite interesting. They said, well, teachers who were wearing masks, because communication with children was so much more difficult, were actually going closer. They were leaning forward, going closer to the pupils to be able to talk to them. And that was their explanation for why they found this sort of slightly odd and unexpected effect. But it's quite a good lesson. As I said, that's only one study, but it's a lesson that we have to be careful that when you introduce a policy, you can have unintended consequences that may make things worse. And with something like mask mandates, you have to be really sure, and I'm afraid the scientific evidence is certainly not there to be confident there's a really big, significant effect that would outweigh the costs to people of wearing masks.
And again, I mentioned this before, I'm a pragmatist, so I did meet with some sort of physicists to ask about the science behind masks and whether they worked or not. And it was quite obvious. The weave of a mask is huge and molecules are tiny, so they're going in and out. Therefore, it wasn't the protection you thought. But what was more interesting, they said a mask, if you wear it, kept the temperature of the breath hotter than it should be, so the air moves straight out rather than going down. So like you said there, if you're speaking to children or speaking closer, it didn't have the effect you wanted at all. It could have made the situation worse. So again, but we weren't allowed these debates, were we, David, during COVID?
Well, unfortunately, that's one of the sad stories of COVID, that scientists, and there were many scientists, and academics who sort of had a different view about the benefit of lockdowns and other restrictions did often get closed down. We've seen in some of the media, I have to say not GBNews, where there hasn't been a proper debate. You tend to only see one side being presented. One of the things that got me about many journalists in the press conferences, they would tend to ask when the government was talking about a restriction, why haven't you introduced this restriction sooner or quicker, or why aren't you introducing a stricter restriction? And that's a reasonable question to ask, but the question was never asked, what is the evidence for the benefits of this restriction? Why don't you lift this restriction earlier? What about this evidence that they're not working as well as you thought? And you didn't have that balance, and I think that was a real shame, and it doesn't help with getting to good policy decisions when you don't have that real scrutiny and real analysis and hard questioning of what's going on.
Professor David Payton, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I mean, all I can say, you just look at what's happening in China. They're all masked up to the nines in China. I know everybody's complaining about how many cases there are in China. So clearly, if masks were the secret of success, China would have been a roaring success, and it's an absolute disaster. So it just seems to me pretty obvious that masks don't make all the difference that are cracked up to be. Anyway, coming up after the break, is it time that the parties on the right unite? We'll be speaking to Richard Tice, founder of the Reform Party, about his plans for the year. But that's after the news with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 11:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Prince Harry says he saw a red mist in Prince William during an argument with him, claiming his brother wanted Harry to hit him back, but he chose not to. In a new trailer for ITV's interview with the Duke of Sussex, he talks about the alleged physical attack by Prince William in 2019, detailed in his memoir Spare. He describes his brother's level of frustration and compares it to similar feelings he experienced for many years. The royal also says he wants reconciliation with his family, but first he says there needs to be accountability. Former royal correspondent Charles Ray told us this could be the end of Harry's relationship with the royal family.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
The Prime Minister's invited union leaders representing striking workers to meet with him on Monday. Rishi Sunak says he hopes for a grown-up conversation about what's affordable. It comes as passengers experience the fourth consecutive day of train strikes over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services are operating as normal. The average house price in the UK fell for a fourth consecutive month in December. Last month's prices dropped by 1.5% compared to November, which means the average house price is now at just over £281,000. Halifax also says uncertainty over the cost of living crisis and rising interest rates are slowing the housing market. And former Chelsea striker and manager Gianluca Vialli has died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 58. Vialli earned 59 caps for Italy and won the Champions League with Juventus before joining Chelsea in 1996. He was the first Italian to manage a Premier League side, becoming player manager for the Blues in 1998. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, almost 20 to 12. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Angela says, we would set a precedent there if we were to repatriate these marbles. This would lead to diamonds and all other artefacts that we have gathered being repatriated. We should basically keep these. And Jane says, if we're talking about sending things back to original countries, we shouldn't have any problem sending illegal immigrants back. Oh, big one there.
Can I just pick up on Angela with a statistic? 90% of Africa's cultural heritage is outside of Africa.
So you think everything should be repatriated?
No, not everything, but I think there are some cases, the Benin bronzes and the Parthenon marbles are a case in point.
And I think that was it, tiny. Some things maybe should go back. Yeah. So...
On Wednesday, the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, set out his plans to fix a broken Britain in 2023. Now, last week here on the show, Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, talked about the potential of a merger between Reform Party, Reclaim Party and UKIP, and this is what she had to say.
That every centre-right splinter party has agreed to potentially talk about an amalgamation, with the exception of one. Can you guess which?
No, go on.
Reform.
Reform?
Yes. Richard Tice has directly refused to have the conversation, which is very unfortunate.
Well, Richard Tice joins us now. Richard, before we talk about your speech from earlier this week, I just wondered what your response to Rebecca Jane was when she says that you are single-handedly stopping a unification of your party, Reclaim Party and UKIP, who are all sort of having a similar agenda. What's your response to what Rebecca said?
Philip and Esther, a very good morning. Well, actually, even before I respond to that, I just was listening to your debate there with the professor about the mask mandate, and we have to battle and fight to make sure that this absurdity of trying to restore mask wearing, which I think is completely wrong. But look, coming on to the issue of parties and things, that actually I view Reform, we view Reform, we're not party of right or centre or left. We're the party of common sense with bold solutions. And, frankly, we're making great progress in the polls. We've got momentum. We're sort of third equal with the Lib Dems. We're racing up the polls, as you can see. And look, the reality is, I think that's because people like what they hear, like what we're saying, the solutions we're putting forward. And that's why when I spoke, I was the first out of the blocks on Wednesday morning with our plans to fix broken Britain, we put forward a very clear, bold solution, which was, in a sense, there are so many crises, it's hard to know where to begin, but tax is the highest for 70 years, inflation's the highest for...
We'll come on to all that, but let me just, if I can try and pin you down this. Are you actually saying that then you are not prepared to do a deal with UKIP and Reclaim Party to sort of unite behind and just be one party? Are you ruling that out, as Rebecca Jane said that you were ruling that out?
We're very comfortable with our own progress. We've got momentum. We've got lots of supporters coming our way, and so we're pushing on with that. Obviously, and actually, competition's a good thing, isn't it? But look, it's one of the reasons actually why I want proportional representation, so that different parties with different ideas can put themselves forward.
Richard, you said in your speech the other day, you said, I think the Tory party deserve to be smashed and destroyed given what they've done to the country, and that your mission was to ensure the Conservatives never have a majority government again. It just struck me that seemed rather more personal than political in terms of what you were trying to achieve. What would you say that this is more of a personal mission against the Conservative Party than actually trying to bring forward your political views?
Well, we've put forward some very clear, bold solutions. And I think after 12 years of Conservatives ruling the country, the country's in the worst state it's ever been in my lifetime. I'm 58. I've never known anything like it. Nothing works. I mean, tell me what works in the country at the moment. So yes, I want proportional representation. We've put forward some big solutions. We're a great country, Philip and Esther, but the truth is at the moment, nothing works. We've got to make Britain work. And to make Britain work, you've actually got to make work pay. So our big idea, which we've always had, is that at the moment, actually, taxes are far too high, particularly for those on low pay. And if you lifted the starting point to which anybody paid any income tax from 12.5 grand to 20 grand, you free up 6 million people on low pay from paying any income tax at all. That is a huge, huge opportunity. For an average nurse on about 34,000, it's about £30 a week saving. That's about a 6% net increase in their take-home pay. Our solution would help resolve many of the strikes that are going on at the moment.
You said, Richard, that you'd pay for that by cutting government waste. So
no. But what I said was, the other key thing is we've got 5.2 million people on benefits, on out-of-work benefit, that neither of the main two parties want to talk about. That's 1 in 8 of the working age population. It's an absolute tragedy. It's 1.5 million more than pre-COVID. These are very often young people. It's a tragedy of lost talent, of wasted opportunity. There's no government focus on getting 1 or 2 million people back into work. We're told by big business there's a labour shortage.
I have raised this many times, and I have, and I agree with you. My question is, I think, when you talk about 12 years of Conservative government, I actually don't think that's true at all, but I do think it's from lockdown, all of this upset, whatever the cost, the inflation, people not working, and the figures you talk about is since lockdown. So would you, as a party, never have gone into lockdown?
We agree on that. Lockdown was a government choice. It was a Conservative government choice. Sweden didn't do that. They haven't suffered the sort of things we have.
So let me come back into the studio. So you wouldn't have done lockdown? No, because I talk about sort of Labour, and Labour would have gone into lockdown. They would have gone longer, further, what have you. The Lib Dems would have. So my question is, I guess, where do we go from here, Simon? It isn't 12 years, it's 2 years, it's lockdown, and most of the main parties had the wrong answer on lockdown.
Stay there, Richard.
Stay there, Richard,
Yeah, I think we were far too draconian in terms of lockdown. We should have had a much more sophisticated approach to it. We were just discussing masks. Clearly, no need to wear them. Sweden is a good example of how they got it right and we got it wrong. So we should not be returning to that sort of approach. In terms of Richard and his opportunities, I think he has a problem in terms of getting cut through for the Reform Party, and I think that's going to be his biggest challenge. He's obviously very articulate, coming up with some really smart policies, but whether he gets cut through to the point where they can have electoral success, I think, is another issue.
And that's why Philip asked the question of all the parties of the right coming together. It wasn't to get rid of Reform, as it were, it was to make it a bigger group of people.
Richard, can I just ask you, lots of people say, if I'm a Conservative voter in the past, I really like what the Reform Party are saying, and I've got a lot of sympathy for what they're saying, and there's no doubt about it. Lots of people who are Conservatives would agree with lots of what you say. I agree with lots of what you say, to be perfectly honest, as you well know. But they say, well, but if I vote Reform, I'm going to allow in a Labour government. Is it your view that a Labour government would be no worse than a Conservative government?
With honourable respect to your good selves, the reality is we've got two forms of socialism. We've got the blue con-socialism, high tax, high wasteful government spending, and we've got the red socialism of the Labour Party. There's no difference between the two of you. We're putting forward bold solutions, low tax, high growth, cut government spending, and having zero waiting lists and cheap energy. And I'm not going to let you get away with the lockdown thing purely, because yes, that was part of the problem. But, the state of the NHS was happening before lockdowns. The state of our energy prices is because of a decade of failure to use our energy treasure under our feet. We're the only party that is now pro-shale gas, pro using coal. We shouldn't be importing this stuff from around the world when we've got it ourselves.
A coronary next to us. I've got to quickly bring
to be
Esther
honest,
in
I
here.
was like Richard, who another one of those loonies on the right, not the left. And Richard, I've engaged fully with what you've said, and I'm listening with an open mind. But you've lost me just increasingly. I like the idea of taxing those who often work the hardest, the longest hours, less. I like that idea. I'm buying into it. But I'm not buying into the idea that you can recoup the money the government would lose simply by cutting government waste. Who are you going to knock out? Phil, maybe Esther,
You haven't, hang on,
make the savings. But then when
And
we
then he's got 20 seconds to reply. Richard.
I said, if you get 2 million people of the 5.2 back into work, that saves 30 to 40 billion a year. These are our people.
Totally naive to suggest all 5 million of those are able-bodied and sufficiently have the wherewithal and the ability to work.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But it's 1.5 million more than pre-COVID. We've got to get our young people back into work.
Richard Tice, leader of the Reform Party, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Now, as the UK wakes up to another 2 days of rail strike action, passengers up and down the country will be left unable to travel. But what about the businesses that will lose revenue as a result of reduced footfall?
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been finding out more.
Check before you travel. Words that so many of us have gotten used to over the last few months. But when our stations are empty and our trains are unmoving, what's the real cost on our high streets?
Well, we definitely noticed there's been a drop in footfall. But at the end of the day, a lot of our customers come from farther away because we're like a unique shop. So having not as many people in has definitely affected us. Through the month of December, you expect the insane busy days, but there were days then it was just completely quiet and the whole town felt it.
How do you feel about the train strikes? Do you support them?
Oh, yeah, totally. They deserve to have a decent wage. I mean, their bosses got bonuses and such. Why shouldn't they get a decent wage?
Cast your minds back to last June. That's when the first wave of rail strikes began. We're now almost 7 months on from that point, and yet a deal between the RMT union and Network Rail is still yet to be struck.
We don't want to have to reballot. We don't want to take any further industrial action. But if they don't change the formulations that they've currently got, that's what we may be forced to do. So the quicker we can get a solution to this and develop the ideas and some documents that everyone can sign up to and our members can vote on, the better it will be for the railway industry, for our members, the passengers and the country. So that's what we're working towards.
Further talks are scheduled for next Monday, but will the government be willing to back down?
We're very keen on dialogue. The government's door is always open, the Transport Secretary's door, the Health Secretary's door. We're very keen to have constructive, two-way dialogue that's honest, that's open, where we can talk about the challenges everyone's facing and see what we can all do to find a resolution to these strikes.
As the UK faces a further 2 days of strike action on the rails, what's needed now more than ever is a resolution to this 7-month-long dispute. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Welcome back. We ought to thank as well Simon Danchuk and Tessa Dunlop for giving us such a feisty time during the show. We will definitely have them back on the show. But let's now welcome Sarah Robertson to take a look at the biggest stories from the entertainment and showbiz world. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What have you got for us?
OK, well, kicking off things is the boxer David Hay, who apparently is in a throuple with Una Healy, who was the former Saturdays singer, and a model called Sean Marie, who I've never heard of until finding out that
we've got a picture
David
of David Hay there
yes,
with these
very
two
beautiful ladies. So this photograph
One on each arm.
One on each arm, yes, living every man's dream, I think, or maybe not.
So what is he supposedly dating both of these?
Well, yes, so apparently a throuple is when you're in a threesome.
Is that a new term?
It's
I
a
thought
new
it was
term.
threesome. I thought it was just a threesome.
Well, I think a threesome is if it's like for the night.
Oh.
And a throuple.
A throuple.
I'm learning about this as well. well,
let's get this
Esther.
right. A throuple means it's serious, not a couple, a throuple. So
yes,
it's serious.
so it's official. So it's a relationship.
It's not just a one night.
Yeah, it's almost like David Hay. Is it the Mormons? Is it the Mormons? They practice
multiple
polygamy, don't they? Yes. So yes,
it's a bit like the George Best thing, isn't it? Asking where it all went wrong for him, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I mean, it's going to get a bit expensive for David because he's had to pay for 2 women to go on holiday. Well, I think he's paid.
He looked to me as if he was coping admirably with that situation.
Yes, well, he seemed very happy, and he said, you know, he's excited about the new year and he's excited for being accepted and being understood. And people have said that they have. It's been reported that they've told friends and family that the 3 of them are in this relationship. And
I think one is enough for me. I'm not sure I could cope with the other one.
Could you not cope with another?
My parents thought that. That's why there is only one Esther. So other people thought that first. So they've come out, have they? Announced that they're this item.
They haven't so much as publicly gone forward and said, yes, we are officially in a relationship. But they've put the photos up. There's another photo emerged from a few months earlier in October where David and Una are holding hands, and he's also got the hand of the other lady. This other lady who's his model. Now, she's apparently been his official girlfriend for 2 years, and then Una's joined them.
So
they've holidayed together for Christmas.
Polygamy's back in 2023. Anything goes. What's he saying? Is there any boxing that he's going to be doing? Or is his love life his new career?
There may be some boxing between the 2 women if he spends more time with one over the other. It depends. I don't know how he's going to split his time. But judging by the big smile on his face in that photograph, he looks more than happy, doesn't he? And he joked as well about having a 4-handed massage during his time at this spa hotel in Morocco. So he looks to be living his best life, does David. So let's see if this catches on.
Somebody who's not having the best time of their life, except for cashing in cheques, is Harry.
Yes, it's very, very, very frightening, actually, and disheartening what is going on, I think, now with Prince Harry. We braced ourselves, hadn't we, for what this book was going to contain, and there was fears that he was going to say, you know, harmful things about Camilla, the Queen Consort, and about his father. But it's extraordinary how he has now placed the royal family into danger by revealing that he killed 25 Taliban fighters. And not only that he killed them, but he took them out like chess pieces. This is a huge, huge, huge break in security. It places the royal family in the centre of a security crisis because now the likes of the Taliban and other, the ISIS and other revenge fighters will want to take their revenge for this. And who are they going to target? I mean, I can't believe Prince Harry has been so willfully stupid and naive to have done something like that.
And we did have Major Chris Hunter on earlier saying that as well. And how about the red line with Camilla?
Yes, well, that's the other thing. You know, with Camilla also, he's really upset his father by attacking Camilla and calling her, alluding to her as the wicked stepmother, and revealing, you know, that he did not want his dad to marry her. But it's the fact that he just cannot seem to contain himself. It's nothing is off limits now with him, and I don't know what he ultimately is trying to achieve from this. Maybe it is just to take down the royal family altogether with him.
Sarah Robertson, thank you very much for your exclusive insight.
That's all we've got time for today, so don't forget to join us tomorrow. And up next, it's the wonderful Christopher Hope covering for Andrew Pearce. So stay with him and watch that, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. For most of us, it's a dry and a bright day out there. It's been a fairly wet but mild start to the year. Still pretty mild out there today, just not quite as warm as it was yesterday. A couple of areas of low pressure bringing spells of rain, but we're kind of in between the two today. So although there are still plenty of showers packing in across Scotland, and it's still very windy here this morning, the weather will be calming down with the showers easing, and from the central belt southwards, most places will be dry. It will cloud over a little through the day across North Wales and northwest England, with some outbreaks of rain possible here, and just the chance of a few showers grazing the far southeast. But as I said, for most, it's dry and it's bright. The wind's easing through the day, and it's still going to be pretty mild. Temperatures not as high as yesterday, but still, for the most part, a degree or so above average for the time of year. As we go through this evening, though, we will start to see the weather changing once more. The winds picking up and showers initially into the southwest before this line of rain then comes marching in through the night. And that'll bring many of us a fairly wet start to the weekend. That rain could be quite heavy over parts of Wales and southwest England, particularly over the hills, but it will be a very mild night once more. And a mild start to Saturday, but as I said, a fairly soggy one too, certainly for a good chunk of England, Wales and southern Scotland. That rain will be moving its way away to the east, and brighter skies will follow for Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England on Saturday morning. The rain may take most of the day before it clears completely from East Anglia and the southeast. Showers will then follow on, as well as some sunny spells, and it will be a blustery day. These are the top temperatures, but they're probably going to be in the morning. By the afternoon, temperatures will be closer to 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, so feeling a little fresher. Temperatures back close to average by Sunday, which will again be blustery with a mixture of sunshine and lots of showers.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. We start with some breaking news just in. A senior Taliban leader has told Prince Harry that the militants he killed in Afghanistan were not chess pieces, they were humans. Anas Haqqani has responded to revelations in Harry's memoir Spare that he killed 25 Taliban fighters. He's taken to Twitter saying, "The ones you killed were not chess pieces, they were humans. They had families who are waiting for their return. Among the killers of Afghans, not many have your decency to reveal their conscience and confess to their war crimes." The Duke hasn't responded to the Taliban's comments so far. Here's Charles.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
That was former royal correspondent Charles Ray speaking to us here at GB News earlier. The Prime Minister's invited union leaders representing striking workers to meet with him on Monday. Rishi Sunak says he hopes for a grown-up conversation about what's affordable. It comes as passengers experience the fourth consecutive day of train strikes over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services are operating as normal. Mr Sunak says the government could legislate to ensure some services continue during strike action.
We're going to bring forward new laws in common with countries like France, Italy, Spain and others that ensure that we have minimum levels of safety in critical areas like fire, like ambulance, so that even when strikes are going on, you know that your health will be protected. I think that's entirely reasonable and that's what our new laws will do.
Well, RMT's General Secretary, or Secretary General Mick Lynch, I should say, meanwhile, says he doesn't think potential new laws will work.
They've also lost the argument on the existing anti-trade union laws because every union is defeating them by having mass ballots. They want to make the action that comes out of those ballots virtually illegal. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they understand what they're doing. They keep quoting what goes on in France and Spain and all the rest of the world. These laws have never been enforced in those countries and they're not enacted in the same way that Grant Shapps is trying to bring in.
The average house price in the UK fell for a fourth consecutive month in December. Last month's prices dropped by 1.5% compared to November, which means the average house price is now at just over £281,000. Halifax also says uncertainty over the cost of living crisis and rising interest rates are slowing the